developed countries agreed at that time. If it's limited to genetic resources, it would be, they could also sign the convention. That led then later on to a lot of dispute what is really the difference, because each and every genetic resource is basically contained in a biological resource. So if you have a piece of timber, if you have plywood here on the wall, that contains genetic resources. There are still functional units of heredity contained in the wood here. And so, is it now being utilized? And that is exactly the question which the Nagoya Protocol is now putting up. Is this being utilized as a genetic resource, or is it being used as a commodity for the normal procedure? Or if you, for example, when you look at the food stuff, as long as I eat rice as a commodity. I don't use it as a genetic resource, but if I start researching the genetic information or the biochemical information to extract, for example, an oil which can then be used for cosmetic purposes and so on, then I would utilize the rice as a genetic resource, and that would then fall under the Nagoya Protocol. So the Nagoya Protocol doesn't differentiate between biological and genetic resource. It focuses on the utilization aspect only. And for example, what we see in the African context with a number of companies which are associated as Union for Ethical Biotrade, they are thinking about a document which, for example, should be attached to export permits for commodities, which states that you are only allowed and that you are only using this exported material as a commodity and not as a genetic resource. And if you want to use it as a genetic resource, you have to go back to the provider country and ask for a proper access permit. So that is this differentiation between the utilization, whether I use it as a commodity or as a genetic resource, or utilize it as a genetic resource. And that is a key differentiation between the two processes. Of course, there still remain gray areas where you, which will evolve somehow, then how to deal with these in the later stages. But I think this distinction is now much more clear than it was before the Nagoya Protocol, where everybody was thinking, what do I access, biological resource or genetic resource, and how do we differentiate? And also we have to see what still is also not properly addressed in the Nagoya Protocol is that genetic information, DNA codes, are available as information. You don't have to get physical access to DNA codes. You can download it from the internet. So how to deal with that? And that's not getting, there's no access in this traditional sense being involved, but still you are utilizing information as a genetic resource. So how to deal with these issues is still an open question. I think there are other issues coming up later on, and as science develops, things might change. But there is also room in national regulations already you can try to address these issues to some extent already in your national legislation. The Nagoya Protocol doesn't bind you to limit the scope as it is formulated in the Nagoya Protocol. National legislation can formulate the access regulations broader, slightly differently, so you can put the focus on what you need in your country, what are the requirements also in your country as a provider, as a user, where you see yourself. And still many countries see themselves in reality are mere providers, whereas many others also which still look at themselves as mere providers are users of genetic resources as well, through research cooperations with neighboring countries, with other universities, where then immediately you become a provider, you need to set up checkpoints, you need to set up the user country measures in your country.
And just to add on, or to emphasize what Andrea said, I think, as you said, the Nagoya Protocol actually leaves great flexibility, and of course, since the biological resources states have sovereign rights over the resources, they can practically also regulate access to biological resources. However, then, of course, the obligations under the Nagoya Protocol will only apply if it's access to to biological resources for the utilization of their genetic resources, and then especially the obligation to share benefits is only triggered when it's a utilization of the genetic resources. And also another point that you mentioned, which is of course important for the high seas discussion also, is not the differentiation, that would be the wrong term, but to address both the physical access to the genetic resource, but also to the samples, but also to the data, to not only, to forget one of the two, because they are actually both important for utilization. So, any other? Yeah.
In our case, I would like to ask Dr. Ganter, does under the protocol any remedy for past biopiracy and also the current? And in our island is botanic, pharmaceutical, horticulture, and also any more breeding for our special species.
The protocol tries to prevent biopiracy. The protocol tries to establish a system which helps providers and users to do and utilize genetic resources in a legally correct manner. The protocol, if your country signs and ratifies the protocol, has to establish measures which tell a user how to access any biological or genetic resource from your community in a legal manner. And it has to require the user to negotiate with your community a benefit sharing agreement and mutually agree terms on this benefit sharing. So that is to prevent biopiracy. The protocol as such doesn't talk about biopiracy. The protocol in itself tries to prevent it and create a legal system which tells users and providers how to do things in a legal manner. Does that answer your question?
Maybe I can also add on. I think it's important to differentiate. I mean, biopiracy is a kind of a flashy term again. Piracy, that sounds really captivating, but actually more appropriate is that you differentiate between misappropriation and misuse. Misappropriation is when you take a genetic resource from a country violating its national legislation. So, for example, your country is providing a genetic resource and you require prior informed consent and mutually agreed terms before access and utilization can take place. But let's say me as a researcher, I take it, I do not get a permit, I do not agree with you on the terms how to use it, I use it without, in violation of your legislation. That is misappropriation, and that is an issue which needs to, according to the Nagoya Protocol, all parties to the Nagoya Protocol need to take measures to prevent this situation that I, a researcher who has violated the legislation of your provider country, is using the resource within my country. So this is misappropriation. Misuse is if I got pig and I got mud, prior informed consent, and we agreed on mutually agreed terms. However, I violate the terms of the agreement. So you said, or we agreed, I could only use the resource for non-commercial purposes, pure scientific research. However, afterwards, once I've done my research, I go and develop a product, I commercialize it without your agreement, and in violation of the terms that we set up in this agreement. That is misuse. However, this issue is something which usually will be dealt with by contractual contract law. It's just like we have an agreement on buying or selling a car. So that is, or should be actually already regulated in all countries. And what the Nagoya Protocol in this regard specifies is that there are certain obligations, and certain indications what you should include in your agreement, which sets out the terms for sharing the resource. That you should think about how to solve disputes if there is a conflict whether I've violated the agreement or not, and that the user countries, or the countries where the user are hosted, should provide access to justice in case there is a conflict, so that you can, for example, sue me in the court in my home country. So biopiracy is, of course, an overall umbrella, but I think the differentiation between misappropriation, violation of legislation, and misuse, violation of the contracts is important to further clarify this. So, having said that, we need to break quickly for coffee, because there's only a certain period of time that we can get coffee. 10 minutes, right? Yeah, and if there's, I'm sorry, but if there's, and it's served outside, exactly. If there are other burning questions, we can take them up after we come back from the coffee break. Hopefully, further issues will be clarified throughout the day. So, help yourself, go outside, and please be back in 10 minutes so that we can continue. Thanks.
这